Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Andrew Tallents. I am the founder and managing partner of the Tallents Partnership. We are proud once again to be partnering with Dan Wells, the founder of Grow CEO and Grow CFO, in the presentation of this series of 14 webinars about self-coaching. The webinars will be taking place on a fortnightly basis, and I will let you know about the next webinar at the end of today's session. This is the 11th in our webinar series, and today's topic is creating space. Before we get into the content of the webinar today, let's just take a few moments to settle into our own space, open our minds to learning something new about ourselves. Think about any distractions that might come up in the next hour or so, and try and find a way to minimize the distractions. Just get comfortable for a few moments. We have about an hour together today. I'm going to share some content with you and get you to do some thinking about how you can become more effective at creating space for yourself and discover ways to maximize your impact when in that personal space. This will take around 35 minutes or so, and then we'll have up to 25 minutes for Q&A. You don't need to write down what's on the slides today because we'll post those online, but I do need you to have a pen and paper to hand as I'm going to ask you some thought-provoking questions later on. I won't be looking at the Q&A box today, so as we go through the webinar, if any questions come up for you, then please write them in the chat box and I will answer them once we finish the presentation. Some of you may have technical problems during the webinar today. If this happens, the best thing is just to exit the webinar and come straight back in. I also know the Wi-Fi has been slow, so please bear with me, we might get some lag. But don't worry, if you do get that, we'll also be recording the session and I'll be posting it onto the Grow portals on LinkedIn and also my YouTube channel, so you can also look at the webinar at your convenience after today. Over the 14 webinars, we are exploring some different aspects of self-coaching. In previous webinars, we have explored the importance of self-leadership, the question, who am I? And we've also explored the question, why am I here? We have talked about the concept of essentialism, the disciplined pursuit of less, and how we can build our resilience over time. We've explored the importance of building our emotional intelligence and how building trust in our key relationships can help us become more successful over time. We've also explored how important key stakeholder management is to a leader's success and learned how to hold ourselves and others to account more effectively. Last time we were together, we learned about becoming more aware of our self-limiting beliefs and how to manage them more effectively. If you didn't manage to see those webinars, you can watch them anytime on my YouTube channel. Just type in Andrew Tallents into YouTube. I'm very fortunate to be able to coach ambitious leaders to help them fulfill their potential and be successful in life. In our coaching sessions, we explore many of the issues on this slide to enable the leader to learn how to start self-coaching over time so that they can sustain their success in the long term. Let's briefly explore what self-coaching is. According to the International Coach Federation, coaching is defined as a partnership with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. Although the concept of coaching stretches back to when Socrates was around, in modern times coaching has played a critical role in sports such as tennis, cycling and football. But it was Tim Gallwey and Sir John Whitmore who took the movement of coaching from the sporting arena into the business world in the early 1970s. Tim Gallwey was coaching tennis students and began to notice that what was going on in the mind of his students was actually hindering their learning and their performance. He started experimenting with ways of helping players learn by developing their own awareness of the way they moved around the court and hit the ball, not by specific instruction. He gave it the term the Any Game and published his initial findings in the Any Game of Tennis in 1974. Later that decade, Sir John Whitmore realized that all of these principles could be applied to business. He continued his research, and in 1992, he published the book Coaching for Performance. The principles of his book are still used extensively in businesses today. My day-to-day coaching style is based on Galway and Whitmore's approach, and is focused on enabling the leader to become more self-aware of how they can be more effective in their personal life, their current role, and their career management. During my coaching sessions with my clients, we identify ways that the leader can take their learning into everyday situations. Specifically, they learn how to coach themselves in key moments in relationship, decision-making, and stakeholder management. I'm enabling the leader to self-coach so that over time, they don't need to spend as much time with me. We define self-coaching simply as the process of leading one's own personal development through self-leadership and the support of others to help maximize their personal and professional potential. Through self-coaching, once you as a leader have decided that you are going to lead yourself first, and you have worked out who you are and accepting of who you are, and you have worked out your true purpose in life and why you are here, and then you commit to an essentialist life, enabling you to really focus on those tasks and relationships that enable you to fulfill your purpose. You are then in a position to learn how to build your resilience over time. And as you do this, you can become more effective at managing your emotions, and you can also choose to react in the most appropriate way as events happen around you. As you continue on your self-coaching journey, you learn how to build trust with key stakeholders and hold yourself and others to account to influence your future success. You learn the importance of managing your own self-limiting beliefs to ensure you make the most of opportunities that are presented to you and build your courage in your day-to-day decision-making. However, as we all know, self-coaching takes much effort and time, and today we are going to learn about how we can create space to enable us to self-coach more effectively. I tend to work with leaders at 3 different stages of their career. They are either newly appointed into an exciting leadership role, they are being successful in their current role and want to move through the gears to achieve more, or they are lost in their current role and can't work out why they are lost. In any of these stages, it is critical to create space to think deeply about our relationships with ourselves and others. Time to think about how we are feeling and how we are progressing in our lives. Time to think about stakeholders and what they really need from us. However, in my experience, many leaders choose not to create space and time in their daily lives, as it sometimes needs intensive, deep inner work that focuses on emotional events from the past and present. When I start to coach a new client, I ask them about the things that hold them back in their current or most recent role. Most clients explain that they don't have enough time to get everything done. We explore what they mean by that, and I try to get the client to understand that they have chosen not to have enough time to get things done. It doesn't just happen to them. When coaching leaders, I tend to find that the following issues get in the way of them creating space and time to think about what is truly important to them. When leaders are appointed into new roles, they are quite rightly pleased with themselves and under the impression that what got them here will be good enough to help them progress further in the future. However, as leaders become more senior in organizations and are more in the spotlight, they cannot always behave as they did before. Rather than creating space for themselves to think about what kind of leader they are, they choose to keep their fingers crossed that everything will be okay and behave as they always have done. Many leaders suffer from imposter syndrome and have low levels of self-confidence in their ability to manage their own time effectively. they choose not to take time out to think about what they are really doing, as this calls for strong self-discipline and emotional strength. Others in the business begin to lose confidence in the leader as they feel disengaged and discouraged due to the behavior of the leader. The leader encourages others to be busy and hardworking rather than inspiring them to think before they do. Most of my clients make incorrect assumptions about what is important when they decide how to spend their time day to day. Post-COVID, there is immense pressure to be visible and on call on Zoom meetings all day, every day, to ensure they stay connected to what's going on. Many leaders choose to do rather than think, but surely that is what the leader is getting paid for, thinking. They have a team of doers. The team is often looking for clear direction from the leader, and this clarity can only be created by ensuring there is space to think. Think about what's important. The leader rarely tests these assumptions, and it is not common for leaders to ask key stakeholders for help in creating space for them, as they fear that it will be misunderstood as a display of weakness. It is far easier for the leader to bury their heads in the sand and work towards predetermined goals without having to say no to people to create the space that is needed. Many leaders are uncomfortable showing vulnerability, as they believe this is a display of weakness. However, it has been proven beyond doubt that being human and vulnerable is one of the key ways in which we build trust and authenticity, by asking others to help us address our fears. We show we are human and that we need help. Others can then relate to us and want to help us create that time. As a leader is often not held accountable by their boss, board, or other stakeholders, there is a tendency to try and muddle through and hope for the best. As we'll find out in the next few minutes, without creating space for time to think, we will never, ever reach our full potential as leaders. We can only build true accountability into our roles when we create the space to think about the decisions we are making and change our behaviors accordingly over the long term. As a consequence of all the above, the leader often chooses to spend their time managing tasks and people and avoiding spending time on their own, where they could work out how to lead more effectively from a position of courageous and considered leadership. Once a leader understands how to create space for themselves, it can lead to opportunities for further personal development. For example, a leader who takes time out to reflect on how effective a meeting was can think about ways to improve the overall team performance in future meetings. Being vulnerable demonstrates how key stakeholders can help leaders to create precious space and time to think about key decisions that need to be made. When things get tough or creative solutions are needed, the leader can rely on their stakeholders to help them focus on what is really needed to be successful in the long term. If leaders really understand how to create space for themselves, it enables them to think more deeply about a variety of situations that could challenge them, take them out of their own comfort zone, and build their self-confidence further. Once the leader begins to create space for themselves, it sets the tone for the rest of the organization and can inspire other employees to become more self-aware of how they are spending their time and how they can create more space for themselves. By creating more space, leaders often build their self-confidence and vulnerability, and this in turn enables them to become more decisive and courageous as a leader. I'm sure some of you now are wondering about how we can create space to become more effective decision makers. What does all this really mean in practice? Easy to say, difficult to do. Of course, as ever, it starts with the leader. They need to be able to demonstrate that they are aware of where they are spending their time and are willing to change their habits with the support of others around them. This sounds easy to achieve, as the leader are the ones that are committing to changing their time management skills. But as we know, it is not easy without support. When working with my clients, I often ask them to list out their meetings in the coming weeks. I ask them to look at their list of essential tasks that they have created that focuses on the things that they and only they can do to be successful in their role. I ask them to think about where they could delegate the chair role to another team member. Which meetings that they attend could they stop attending? Which meetings could they attend for only part of the meeting, the first 5 minutes or the last 5 minutes? I also ask them to block out time in their diary for space to think about important decisions and reflect on what has happened during the previous week. I would like you all now to try this and take a few minutes to look at your diaries for the next 2 weeks and think about which meetings or webinars or tasks that you've already got in the diary that you really need to attend to, and see how much space you can create to think rather than do. Think about where you can delegate responsibility for running the meeting and ask for a debrief afterwards. Think about where you have agreed to attend meetings due to it being a habit. Would the meeting be better without you there? You are there to lead, not run meetings. Where you have been invited to meetings, think about how much value you really add to the meeting. And if it's not enough, then don't go and see if anyone really misses you. Think carefully about where you are spending your time. Where can you free up some time to think? I'm going to give you 5 minutes. Once you've completed this exercise, I'll be asking you to share how many hours you think you can create each week for thinking rather than meeting and doing. If you're watching this webinar recording, then just press pause now and then restart once you've completed the exercise. I'll be back with you in 5 minutes. Okay, I hope that's enough time for most of you. Obviously, you can do this exercise if you've not completed, but I just really wanted to take a quick poll to see anonymously how much time you could create. So the question I've got here is, having thought about your diary for the next couple of weeks, how much space can you create in a week through non-attendance at meetings and spending your time differently? We've got 0 hours, 1 to 2 hours, 3 to 5 hours, 6 to 10 hours, more than 10 hours, or it's not applicable. This will be anonymous, but if you'd like to respond, we can see how much time you're creating out there. I'll just let a few more come in. And the results are in. So what we can see is that 23% of you have been able to create 3 to 5 hours, 31% 1 to 2 hours, and 8% 6 to 10 hours. And I'm pleased to say that none of you have said 0 hours, so it's all possible. And what I find when I work with my clients is that on average, it tends to be somewhere between 3 and 5 hours that they can create a week to actually do some thinking time. So thank you for doing that. So what leaders do is start creating new habits and creating space and time for them to think. But moving on to what the leaders should actually do with the time they have gained, let's talk about that. In Derek Draper's book, Create Space, he talks about the importance of leaders having time to think about key aspects of their leadership approach. Firstly, he talks about having space and time to think about the first that comes into your head. How does it make you feel? The second thing, the more deeply that a leader can actually think about what needs to happen, the more effective the decision is likely to be. So thinking is really important. Secondly, he talks about creating space to connect with key stakeholders. He talks about really connecting by being attentive and showing that you really care about how the key stakeholder feels. It means staying on longer in a meeting because the stakeholder needs to be truly heard. The leader needs to have all the time in the world for their key stakeholders, yet many of these meetings are cut short as the leader needs to go to the next meeting. And how does that make the stakeholder feel? Next, Derek talks about creating the space to do. What he means here is that the limited essential things that the leader chooses to do need to be done to the absolute best of their ability, rather than last minute flying by the seat of their pants, last minute Charlie. Being present in the activity and inspiring confidence in others is key when executing their key tasks. Finally, and most importantly, Derek talks about creating space to be. This is all about presence and becoming aware in the moment about how you are impacting your own ability to achieve, and also of those around you due to your behavior. Most leaders find this the most difficult space to create, as it demands that a leader does nothing apart from being present in the moment. I remember asking a busy, overworked and overwhelmed client once to consider sitting on an empty park in London with the sole purpose of becoming present in the moment for an hour, thinking about nothing, just noticing what was happening in the here and now. The CEO looked at me as though I was from another planet and said that it was too scary to think about nothing for an hour and that they couldn't do it due to the fear of what actually might pop into their head. They actually had a true fear of that. There are many ways that we can create space and time to think. One of the techniques that allows us to be more present that you may have heard of is mindfulness. Mindfulness is simply a way of creating space and time for us to think about nothing. It is a way of becoming present in the moment and noticing when our mind wanders. Practicing mindfulness can be useful in helping leaders to take time out to think about nothing. When we think about nothing, it clears our minds for the important things that need our attention. When practiced over time, mindfulness can also help leaders to gain real clarity before speaking or making key decisions. I would like us all now to just try a very simple mindfulness exercise. It'll only take a few minutes. And let's just see what it does for us. So for this exercise, you can either lie on the floor, sit in a chair or on a cushion. I'd like to do this now. Try and ensure that as many parts of your body are touching the chair or floor as possible so you can actually feel the connection. Just make yourself nice and comfortable. With your eyes open for the moment, just become aware of your surroundings, the noises, the light, and how your body is feeling in this position. Notice where your body is in contact with whatever is supporting you, and notice the weight in your body and feel the contacts in your legs and your feet. Place your hands on your legs and lower your shoulders into a relaxed position. Now just start to notice your breath. Breathe in and out normally and notice the rhythm. Don't try and change the rhythm, just notice it. Now close your eyes. Move your attention to the top of your head. How does the sensation at the top of your head feel? Don't try to change it. Just notice it. And then gradually just scan down your body, noticing the feelings in your face. Just accepting them for what they are. Your shoulders, your chest. Notice how your chest feels. And then scan down to your stomach and notice your stomach. And then where your bottom connects to the ground or the seat. Your legs, your ankles, your feet and your toes, just feel them. Now move your attention back to your breath again and start to count your breaths. Breathe in through your nose, count 1, and out through your mouth, count 2. And do this in your natural rhythm until you count up to 10 and then start again from 1. As you count your breaths, notice when your mind wanders and let it wander. Don't judge or analyze the thought that comes to mind. Just let it come and then let it go and come back to counting your breaths again. The mind will wander and this is okay. Just acknowledge the thought and then let it go. And bring your attention back to your breath and count 1 in through the nose and 2 out through the mouth, 3 in through the nose, 4 out through the mouth. Just stay with this for a few more moments, counting your breaths up to 10 and then starting again at 1. Bring your attention back to your breath every time your mind wanders. Just leave you to practice that for a few more moments. Now moving your attention back to your surroundings, hearing the noises around you and sensing the light around you. When you are ready, I would just like you to slowly open your eyes, move about in your seat or around on the floor, and just bring yourself back into the room and become aware again of your surroundings. Some of you may have tried mindfulness before, and if you haven't, thanks for trying it. Some people find it a bit weird and don't really feel anything. But what I notice with the clients that use it with me is that they don't always see the value in the early mindfulness sessions, but when they practice it regularly and really carve out time for it, it becomes easier to create the space and time needed to think deeply about what is really happening right now for you and what is important to you right now. And then it brings the action that's needed into focus. So once you become more effective at creating space to think about what is important to you, the next step is to support your team in creating a culture where thinking more deeply about what they do becomes a habit. Nancy Klein, in her book, Time to Think, talks about the 10 components of a thinking environment that lead to better decision-making in organizations. If a leader can demonstrate the following habits, they will inspire other team members to think more deeply and contribute more effectively to the team. Attention is all about listening with respect, interest, and fascination. Incisive questions remove assumptions that limit ideas. Equality is all about treating others as thinking peers, giving equal time and attention, and keeping agreements and boundaries. Appreciation is about practicing 5-to-1 ratio of appreciation to criticism. Ease is all about offering freedom from rush or urgency. Encouragement is about moving beyond competition. Feelings is all about allowing sufficient emotional release to restore thinking that's being blocked. Information is about providing a full and accurate picture of reality. And place is about creating a physical environment that says back to people, you really matter. And finally, diversity is all about adding quality because of the differences between us. I would like you all briefly to look at these habits and just pick one that resonates that you don't practice at the moment, and commit to trying it out in the next conversation you have with a friend, a colleague, a group, or a team. Just take a few moments to pick the one you believe you can do from today. So now you've done that, what is it that you can do further to create space for you and your team so that you can make more informed and considered decisions? The journey to forming new habits that enable you to create the right amount of space for you is a long and challenging adventure. There will be times when you feel you are making breakthroughs, and then the next day you are back to old habits. This is normal for all of us, and it takes time to create and hold the space that is so important to leadership. It starts with us, every one of us, and then once we start role modeling the right types of behaviors, we can support others who want to create space for themselves. Over time, each team member can learn how to support each other, and team performance improves. Think about the next couple of weeks in your life. Look for opportunities where you can create some thinking time. Create a list of events that you choose not to attend anymore. Think about the 4 types of space you can create around thinking, connecting, doing, and being. Think about how you can create a culture that promotes time to think. Ask others to support you as you practice changing your behaviors that create the space and time that you need. A quick summary of what we have covered in today's webinar. It is not easy to create space in our lives. Become more aware of how you currently manage your own time. Create the time to think. Practice mindfulness and stick with it over a period of time. It really does help. Encourage your team to think more deeply about what they are doing rather than just let them do it. As always with these webinars, I would like to make all of you an offer today for saying thank you for coming along. If you would like to learn more about how to create space more effectively, including some of the techniques and tools that we've talked about today, with my support and challenge, then I'd be very happy to work with you in a complimentary 2-hour coaching session with me in the coming weeks. I do have a limited number of sessions that are available from today. So if you are interested, drop me a line on LinkedIn or by email or via the Grow CFO and Grow CEO portal, and we can discuss next steps. For those of you that are interested in further reading, these are the 3 books I would recommend. We refer to them today. Time to Think by Nancy Kline, Create Space by Derek Draper, and then an entry book to mindfulness, which gives you some practice in doing it, working alongside a CD. Well, thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed the webinar. Thanks for practicing the mindfulness as well. We're going to go into Q&A in a moment. But before I do that, the next webinar that we're going to be running is actually changed date. It's moved now to the 30th of September at 11 o'clock. And we're focusing on the importance of coaching teams. I'm now working with a lot of leaders who really want to build more effective teams, particularly when they're working remotely. And we're going to be talking about how a leader can effectively coach teams in the next session. So we're going to go into Q&A now, and I'm going to see if there are any questions that are into the chat box. And we've got around 15 minutes or so, so just take your time if there are any questions to raise, and I'm very happy to try and answer them. While they're coming in terms of my experiences of working with leaders in this area, it's probably the hardest area to convince leaders that it's important to do. However, once they buy into it and they start to create space and time to think, they quickly learn the benefits of it and start to make better decisions. They start to role model the fact that it's not all about doing, and indeed sometimes they deliberately block out their diaries and put in their calendars words like thinking time, strategic thinking time, alone time, whatever it is, so that other people in the company can actually see that's what they're doing and respect those boundaries. So very hard to do. What I found is that you really need to have very good administration support around you, whether that's your own PA or whether it's someone that works with you as part of a team of PAs. And if you can build that trust for that support person to really protect your diary and to make sure that the boundaries stay in place, it really can help you to maintain that discipline. So we've got a couple of questions coming in. We've got a question here. Can you clarify what attention and ease in the Nancy Kline is actually involving, please? Yeah, it's a really easy read, Nancy's book, but I can tell you in summary that attention is all about engaged listening. So if I was with you and I'm listening to you, you'll be able to tell whether I'm actually being attentive to you and showing attention. I won't be looking away, I won't be looking at my watch, I won't be thinking about things. I'll actually be demonstrating to you that I am listening to you. And what I won't be doing is finishing your sentences. And what I won't be doing is actually thinking about what you're trying to say. And what I won't be doing is actually interrupting you. What I'll be doing is actually showing the attention to you, to enable you to finish your own thoughts and for you to actually communicate to me what it is that you really want to do. It's all very well, and leaders do this a lot, to try and be helpful and use all their experience to solve their team members' problems. But actually, the team members know the best way to solve their problems. They've just not thought about it yet. So attention is all about giving the attention to the individual that you're with so that they can think easily. The ease is all about making sure that anybody that wants to think is able to think and encouraged to think, as opposed to necessarily just do. And so ease is all about the environment we create as leaders to actually enable people to think easily. So that's about making sure, again, that people know the ground rules in terms of not interrupting each other. It means encouraging thoughts to be developed rather than just be stopped. So it encourages crazy thoughts. It encourages people to actually want to offer thoughts that maybe have been thought of before, but they want to raise them again. So it's enabling the environment of thinking to be easy to happen. But I really encourage you to read the book. It's a very good read. And once you've read the book, it's very easy to start implementing some of the techniques with your teams. The second question is, to what extent, if at all, do you think that creating space is an innate skill? It's a really good question. I don't think it's an innate skill. I think it's a learned skill. and it's a learned skill that's linked to self-discipline and self-leadership, which is what all of this webinar series is about, really. I think it's something that came naturally to us as human beings, obviously with our previous ancestors and generations, because there wasn't as much technology around. There was not much to do. It was basically to live and survive and to gain food and to create an environment where you could survive. So there was a lot of thinking time, and it came naturally to us. So it is something that comes naturally to human beings. And I think it is something that comes naturally to us. But to say that we can't do it or we don't have it, I think is wrong. I think it's about getting back into practicing it. And actually, when we do create space and time to think, we connect with much more things than we could ever think of in terms of previous thoughts, our future, what's going on for us now. So I don't think it's an innate skill. I think it's something that you have within you and you just need to rediscover. And that's what I find with many leaders, as long as you're willing to create the space. And what I find people practice this for a few days or maybe a couple of weeks, and then they go back to their old habits because of forces from other stakeholders, because they're encroaching on their time. But what it comes down to is you being in charge of your own time and your own time management, but getting help to that. I'm just going to see if there are any other questions that come through. How often do you recommend space is created? It's a really good question. When I'm working with my clients, it ranges really. So one of my clients takes a whole half day a week where they block it in their diary, and for 3 or 4 hours, they just think. They're out of the office. One of my clients even goes to a lovely parkland that they really enjoy being in. They do some mindfulness and they just think. And everyone knows they're out of the office and that's their thinking time, and they're courageous enough to do that. That works for them. Other people prefer to do it in smaller chunks, and what they prefer to do is maybe the first thing they do at part of the day is, rather than come into their first meeting at 9 o'clock, they put a block in a diary, and 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock is thinking time. Bit of mindfulness, thinking about the day, thinking about what happened yesterday, and they make sure that nothing comes into that block each day. It's 9 till 10 every day. That's something I do. And then if I choose to do something different other than think, then at least I'm choosing to do that. So in terms of that 3 to 5 hours that's created in a week, some people do it daily, some people do it as one big chunk, but I'd really encourage you to try and protect that time, make sure everyone's aware of it, communicate to everyone that's a stakeholder and gets a chunk of you in terms of your time, but that's what you're doing and why you're doing it. And you'll soon find that you gain some respect for doing that, and other people will start to copy it. Any other questions? Would you create separate space for well-being and work-related thinking? I think it's a really good question. And the answer to that is yes. Yeah, I think that can be done. I think you can have space where you know you're just going to be thinking about your own personal well-being and making time for that. And probably mindfulness comes into that in terms of you creating that space and time for yourself. And in terms of work-related thinking, I think, again, that is best done when you're in the frame of mind for thinking about work and just starting to think more strategically, thinking more at a higher level, thinking about some of the relationships. So I think, yes, it is good to do both. And I think there's a third category, which we talked about in the webinar today, which is that pure mindfulness where you're really thinking about nothing. So it's a 3 compartments, really. Thinking about nothing, so you're just creating the time to be present. Creating some personal space to think about your own well-being, what that means to you, and then work-related thinking about the more strategic aspects of your work as opposed to the doing. Thank you for that question. So we've got 9 minutes before this webinar finishes. I'm just going to see if any more questions come in. Obviously, you can contact me after today if you want to pick up on anything here I think reading the 3 books would really help you if you're interested in the subject. And as I said, next time that we get together in a couple of weeks' time, we'll be trying to work on how we build on the learning we've gained in the previous webinars in terms of applying that to our teams, and how do we ensure that our teams can learn how to self-coach as well. So I'm going to draw it to a close. I hope you have a good afternoon. I hope that you can find some good time to spend in those 1 or 2 or 3 hours that you hopefully can create in the next week or so. And happy thinking. See you all soon. Bye-bye.